Okay, model, so today we're going to do a little bit of a review on this new product that I bought here. This is the washable agent from AK. Now the idea of this stuff is you can mix it with acrylic paints. It says almost all acrylic paints, you mix it with that in a 10% portion. You spray it on and then you can just use water on a brush to chip it away. It makes that acrylic paint washable, as in you can wash it off with a wet brush. I've seen a couple of little reviews on this, but I want to try a few different types of paint, like some Tamiya, some Volatile, some AK. I want to try a few different paints, and I want to try and change the mix a little bit to see if it actually varies, as in if I put a little bit more of this agent in, is it going to take more off? If I put a little bit less in, is it a little bit more controllable? I just want to have a play around with it, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to do a video on this, have a play around that, so you guys don't have to experiment and you'll know what this thing is capable of. One of the things I really love about this is this little bottle. It looks like an oil bottle that you get for your car. You know, your 4-litre oil bottles for your car. It's the same shape and the design and everything, but look at the cute little thing. Isn't that gorgeous? It's just, I think it's just a great design. It's something completely different. I just love it. And you do have your instructions on the back here telling you how to use it and your proportion to mix it in and things like that. But it says a 10% ratio. One of the things I did discover, I've had it open just to have a little bit of a sniff of it, and it smells quite pleasant. It's not one of those foul odours like a thinner or anything like that, but one of the things I found is it's actually fairly thick. So as you can see, that's not even dropping off the toothpick there. It's very thick. Okay, so one of the things is it's obviously going to thicken your paint up a little bit if you add too much of it. So but 10% is not a lot. Obviously it's not a lot at all, so hopefully at that ratio it's not going to actually affect your paint too much. But I'm going to put in a little bit more, probably go 15-20%, and just try that as well, just to have a play with it. I don't intend to use that much normally, but if I want something that's just about the paint's all worn off, maybe I'll go to it. It's just going to depend, I guess, on how well that works. Anyway guys, I'll get on with it, and I'll just show you what I'm going to do it on first. I'm going to do it on this old aircraft frame here. Now this has just got some AK metal paints, and it's also got a little bit of the MacLeod paints on there as well. Now that stuff's been there for months and months and months, for quite a while. You've seen this probably in an earlier video where I played around with these things. So hopefully I won't have to coat that or anything before I try and use this. I'll just put it straight on that surface, and hopefully it should work. It shouldn't affect the paint underneath. So one other thing I'd just like to mention with this, guys, if I was using this product on a piece of armour or whatever I'm going to be using it on, chipping like an old Japanese aircraft or something, I would probably tend to put down a coat to protect the base coat underneath first before I use this agent. But maybe with experience using it and just seeing if it's not going to damage the paint underneath or whatever, I'm just scared of sort of rubbing too hard to try and get that washable paint off, and then rubbing on the paint underneath too much. If I've got a protective coat there, hopefully it shouldn't affect that base coat. So that's the main reason I would do it. But if this works well enough, you shouldn't have to rub too hard and to get the effect you want, if you know the mix to use and things like that. So, but this is going to be trial and error. We'll see how it works. But personally, if I was going to use this straight off the bat, I'll be putting a clear coat over this to protect it. But anyway guys, I'll get on with playing around with this. I'll do a couple of different colours and different types of paints on here. I'll mark them up so I know what they are, and I'll explain as we go through. A heavier mix ratio, different types of paint, Tamiya versus AK, that sort of thing. And we'll see how we go with it. Okay modelers, so I've got a few different coats of green on there, and I've already had a play, as you can see here. Now this one here is a Tamiya with 20% of the this washable agent, the AK washable agent, and all I've done, I've used down here, I've done like a really subtle effect, if you can see that at the back there, just with a big feathery brush like that, just rubbing it backwards and forwards nice and gently, and it gives a really subtle fading effect. Now the other one here around the panel lines, I've done with a little bit stiffer brush. I'm using a pretty old crappy brush here. I've used a few different paints with different consistencies. The first one I'm going to have a play with here, this is Tamiya paint with 20% of the AK agent in it, and as you can see I've already had a bit of a play with it, and down the back here I used a light feathery brush. Actually, I'll just pick it up here. This one here, it's a fairly old feathery sort of thing, and I just sort of rubbed it backwards and forwards to get a nice subtle effect. And then on the panel lines I use this one here, which is a bit stiffer, and rubbed over the panel lines and around the edges, and it works really well. Now that's 20%, and what I'll do, I'll just quickly show you just how well this works. So I'll just put a bit of water along this panel line like so. Okay, forgive the noise of the aircraft in the background, guys. I live near an airport, as most of you probably know now. And you can already see, just I'm not even putting any pressure on that, and that's already starting to come off where the panel line is there, along the leading edge. Okay, so you could use like an even thinner brush and get like just the panel line, the immediate panel line if you wanted to. Depends on what sort of look you're after, but honestly I'm really impressed with how this works, because you seem to have a lot more control with this than you do with, say, like the hairspray technique. The hairspray technique, some areas comes off really easy, some areas it sort of hangs on, the paint seems to hang on a little bit more. Now I'll rub a little bit harder, okay, a little bit more pressure on there now, and as you can see that really knocks it off. Now normally I wouldn't rub that with my finger, because the finger obviously takes off more paint, but as you can see you can take that right off there if you want to. But if you just want to do like a few little areas, like I'll just wet this down just to sort of soften it up a little bit like so. Okay, now I'll just go around like so, and I'm not putting hardly any pressure on this, guys. I'm just sort of just touching it, and I'll use a tissue to soak up the excess there rather than rubbing it, so you can see the effect that I've ended up with like so. And you can see that that's sort of taken that off really nicely there, so I'm really impressed. Now that's 20%, and then I've got on the top wing here this guy here. Now this is Tamiya again, and this one here is 10%. Okay, so I'm just going to try the panel lines first up. Now I can see that's already starting to lift off there, so even at 10% that's yeah, it's still having the same sort of result. Yeah, it is. Once you give it a second or so for the water to do its work and soak in there a little bit, mind you, I am having to rub just a little bit harder, not a lot harder, but just a little bit harder now to sort of get it to move. But it is coming off, like it's not like I say, hairspray. You know, one area the paint would just hang in there, you're not going to be able to get it off anyway, where another area is just going to fall off in big flakes. So as you can see, guys, that's coming up really nicely. So for winter effects it's going to be really good. So I'll try the 10% again, this time with the big feathery brush over a wider area. Hopefully we should be able to get, you know, some nice sort of light chipping effects by doing this. I'm not rubbing hard, it's just fairly subtle, it's just over and over the same spots, and I can already see, I'm not sure if you're picking that up on the camera, but it's definitely taking that off in really fine bits. So I'll just clean the water off there. And hopefully you can see that subtle chipping that's going on there. So really impressed with that. And I'll just turn it around now. On this side here I have got, this is the AK paint. Okay, hopefully this camera's focused well enough for you guys. Again, like always, it's hard for me to sort of see into the viewer that I'm looking in, whether it's focused completely or not. A bit of a pain in the bum, but I'm going to have to play with that. But anyway, this side here is, like I say, the AK interactive paint. Now this one here has got the 10% mixture, like recommended on the bottle. I figured because it's an AK product, I'll just use their recommendations. So I'm just going to go over, soften it up with the water for a little bit. And I've just used one of the AK thinners with this as well. I'm not sure whether thinners will actually affect this stuff. I guess some of them will. I tried to mix it with leveling thinners, but it seemed to have a little bit of a funny reaction to that. But yeah, I'm going over this nice and light. I can see some areas it's already starting to, yeah, it's starting to go now. It's starting to lift in some places. But with the 10%, it seems like it's a little bit more resistant. It takes a little bit more effort to get it to actually start working. So what I'm going to do, I'll use the stiffer brush We'll start working with that. Let's see how we go with that. Yeah, and that's definitely starting to work there now, guys. Hopefully you can see that. Looks like the AK paint takes a little bit more work. Mind you, I'm getting a really nice effect with that because it's coming off just around the panel lines where I want it to come off. If you were doing, say, a Japanese aircraft and you know you want it to have that weathered look, actually I ruined that by touching it with the side of the metal edge because this brush is old and cut down to the point where it's just about had it now. But yeah, it looks like the longer you let it soak too, the more it softens it up. That's coming up there really nice there now, guys. I'll just clean that off. Tissue there. As you can see, that's really nice. That's come off there beautifully actually. And like I say, compared to the hairspray technique, you seem to have so much more control with this. I mean, you still haven't got perfect control, but far more than you do with the hairspray technique. So I'll just use the feathery brush here now. I'll wet over a fairly big area, and we'll just see if we can just start to get some nice light chipping effects going on. I can see at the front of the wing there, anywhere that it's like angles, because the brush, obviously the bristles will press harder on those areas, so it's starting to lift off there straight away pretty much. But as you can see, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on that brush, it's only just raking it backwards and forwards over the area. And maybe where it's starting to chip, that maybe that's just where the high parts of the paint are. Sometimes you get little tiny micro pieces of dust and dirt under there, and that's probably what it's highlighting. That's probably what it's going over and knocking off the paint from there. But I can see that, and hopefully you'll pick it up in the camera. I'll just wipe that off. You can see there you've got a really nice subtle chipping effect. I'll get it up close to the camera, get it focusing. You see that there? Very nice. It's just a really nice subtle chipping effect. So I'll give it a bit of a harder rub now, like so. And it's taking off more and more. Like I just touched that with the metal edge of the brush there. That's why I took off a big chunk there. See what I might do, I might use a different brush. I'll go back to the more harsh brush here. Okay. And like I say, you got control, so you can keep going with this as far as you want to, or as little as you want to. But yeah, that's given us some really nice results there. Now what I can see is where around the edges here, where I haven't put the water and haven't brushed it off, it's actually left like a silhouette, like a bit of a coat, like a little bit of a distortion mark around the edges of that, where I've actually cleaned it off. But you get that with the same effect with if you're using, you know, hairspray technique as well, where you're just rubbing over it with water. But normally once you give it a bit of a clean up, I'll just put water over the rest of the surface a little bit, not a lot, just a bit like so. Give it a quick wipe with the tissue, and that should clean off those areas like so. Hopefully you can see that there now. So you're getting rid of that, whereas you can see on here where I haven't done that, you can see where it's really distinct where I have been actually using that technique. So definitely make sure you clean it up after you've done it, guys, and that's the sort of result you end up with. But really impressed. Maybe it's going to depend on what sort of look you want to have at the finish, as to whether you do 20% or 10% or even maybe 30% if you really want to rip the hell out of it and just leave chips and flakes around. But it's one of them things now I'm going to use all the time, rather than using the hairspray technique, because like I say, I have so much more control over this. I really love that finish. I was sort of concerned it'll end up just being like hairspray, in that you won't have complete control. You're still going to end up with, you know, like big sections will just flake off and other sections will just come off really hard. But that's come up really nice, and I can see, like I say, the rough surface which is on this old aircraft, that's where those highlights with that brush, like I say, when I first started, that's what it was doing, is just knocking off those high raised areas. But if it was a really smooth surface, obviously it'd be a little bit more uniform, a little bit more not so conspicuous that you've got dots of rough paint on it. Actually, we've got really thin paint up here where I haven't sort of painted the surface completely. I'll just do a quick little trial with that. I'll get down the camera for you a little bit. Okay, I've got hardly any water on this brush, just a tiny little bit there, and that's really thin, that paint up that area. And I can see now I've already got to the point where I can work that to the point where, you know, if I want to have the real leading edge there, really silver, I can. If I just want to have it like in sections, I can just sort of go along and chip it off like so. Okay, so yeah, very good stuff, guys. Really impressed. Again, it's one of those products, guys, it's going to be fun to play with. Just keep playing around with it. I'll put the bottle up here, get our camera to focus for us. Yep, the washable agent from AK. Can't remember what it cost me now. I think it was $12 or something like that. But it got delivered with other products, so yeah, I can't exactly remember what the price was, but it wasn't really expensive. It wasn't too bad at all. For the amount you get in here, that's going to last you quite a while, guys. But anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video like always. Sub down below if you haven't subbed. I will put some links to this to maybe eBay or Amazon or whatever, because it must be fairly widespread now. We can get it in Australia, so I'll definitely try and find some links to put down there for you guys. Like always, I've got Patreon down there. I've got a few links down below, so have a look at that. Let me know what you think of the product if you've used it. If you buy it and use it, let me know what you think. Like always, I'm really happy to read your comments, guys, down below, so put them down there. And until next video, take care, guys.